everyone. Thanks for making time for this talk. So to briefly talk about our journey as a company in open source, from contributing to projects to creating projects. And my name is Vishal. I'm CTO for InfraCloud Technologies. I am one of the contributors to Fission project. It's a serverless project on Kubernetes. And I also run the Kubernetes Pune community meetup almost every month, talk about Kubernetes and the rest of cloud native technologies. Now, coming to us, when we were born as a company, infrastructure technologies were getting, mature in the sense, a lot of new, interesting, exciting stuff was happening. Chef and Puppet were the way to do infrastructure not too long ago, right? Probably like 7, 8 years ago. And Docker was just born. It was super exciting time. Everybody was super pumped about Docker. And we were born as a company almost in the same time, using all these technologies, for implementation, for our own purposes and things like that, right? And I was betting my full bets on Mesos to be the next orchestrator on top of containers. And I never thought Kubernetes will become the dominant orchestrator for container technologies. I was so wrong. So that's how technology works. It works in ways you didn't imagine, you didn't anticipate, so to speak, right? Lucky for us, we worked with a few customers around Kubernetes, understood a little bit more of power of Kubernetes and the community and the open source movement around Kubernetes. I saw a very close and realized this could be the next potential orchestrator more than Mesos, so to speak, right? I also started the Pune Kubernetes community meetup around the same time, 2016 late sort of. And for the first meetup that I ran, there were only 7 people, including myself. And over time, we kept running the community meetup every month, sharing our knowledge, sharing whatever we were doing at work to the broader community, and got to a point where we had probably 50 odd people attending the meetup every month, over the years, basically. I think what that did to us as a company and to us as a group was, open source community, sharing your knowledge attracts like-minded folks, right? And over time, the kind of folks that we started interacting more and more with and came in touch more and more with, were from open source and communities, like Python Pune, Docker Pune. At one point, we had all the 3 organizers of all the 3 meetups, Python, Docker, and Kubernetes, working with us together, right? And I think that is one of the crucial points I want to say. Open source code is absolutely important and relevant, but it is about community first. You need to build the right set of people with the right incentives and the right mindset of sharing what you are building and being open to that, vulnerability that whatever I can build, I can share outside, and not be concerned about how I'll be perceived, so to speak, right? And this is one of the most crucial points I would say in our journey as a company. We were able to bootstrap that community before we got to the point where we started building open source projects, so to speak. The other thing that I think helped us is we worked with a few commercial product companies to develop software for them, part of it open source, part of it, commercial, obviously. And that gave us the, chops or expertise, so to speak, for product development, right? And that combined with problems that we saw with our other customers who were implementing these technologies, using these technologies, was a good combination, So you had the open source communities on one side, the expertise of product development on the other side, and knowing the end user problems on the third, axis of the triangle, if I were to call it that ways. That was a very sweet spot to understand what to build next, basically. So we started, of course, very small. One of the very early projects, was a cube checker. And we didn't have enough either conviction or bandwidth, or both maybe potentially. We didn't take it up too seriously. We just, left with a few initial, working prototypes and kind of left it in between, right? And to our surprise, like almost 12 to 18 months later, one of the major large cloud providers actually picked up exact same idea, built slightly more mature project out of that, right? But that was our learning or lesson out of that. If you have a conviction in an idea, go ahead and, probably pursue it a little more thoroughly than you did otherwise. Now, that created a culture, with all those folks inside. We started doing hackathons, giving a very different name every time. So one of these hackathons that we did in 2018 gave birth to a project called BotCube. Now, BotCube is an open source ChatOps platform, and all it does is allow you to connect to your infrastructure both ways, you firing commands to you getting outputs using your chatting tool. It could be Slack, it could be Mattermost, it could be Microsoft Teams, it could be Discord, anything of that sort, right? And over time, we were able to get good traction on the project. We got a lot of PRs, contributions, issues, from the end users, from, other users of the project, and so on and so forth. Now, as we kept maturing as a company, when we were building BotCube, we realized if we have to integrate with Microsoft Teams, we need to have a SDK for Microsoft Teams. And the only SDKs available that time were in C# and other languages. So one of the sub-projects that came out of BotCube was actually a bot builder SDK for the Microsoft Teams, but it in Golang basically. We were also contributing to another project called Fission, which is an open source serverless framework for Kubernetes. And while we were implementing or contributing to the project, there were some end users who reached out to us. We did implementations for them and understood those end user problems very, very closely, sort of. When we got more and more complex stacks onto Kubernetes, we realized there has to be something like Homebrew, but for Kubernetes, right? Something that can give you a one-click, single-click install onto Kubernetes, and that's where we put some effort into Kbrew. It was not always that you had a grand or big idea, that was open source. Sometimes it was something as simple as a Cassandra Jaeger, tracing plugin, right? So Cassandra provides the utility to do tracing internally, or you can plug in your own tracing mechanism, by following the interfaces that Cassandra exposes basically, right? And we had to do this for a customer. We open sourced it. Not a big tool, not a big project, but something that we still saw a lot of people, using and generally finding useful. So I think that was another lesson that we had as a company. It's okay to start small. It's okay to start with a small utility, small tool, small project, right? But then keep going at it over time, and you'll hopefully build one of those projects to be the larger impact on the community and the industry in general. Another project that we noticed that getting a setup of things like Prometheus, Cortex, Thanos, and rest of the components was not easy, especially if you're going to set this up across clusters. If you have 10, 20 Kubernetes clusters, you want to set up a pipeline and set up across these clusters, it's not super easy. So we started opening or building a project called Cryas, and we open sourced it, and we are still working on it pretty actively. Other two projects that we helped to commercial companies to open source, they had proprietary technologies that they built internally that were proven to a customer base, but they wanted to open source that, is Tinkerbell and Parallels. Tinkerbell is a bare metal, instance provisioning and a workflow system, and Parallels is a zero trust, access management for thousands of clusters from a single, pane of glass, so to speak. Now, you must be asking, all this is good, but where are we now, with these projects? What's happening? Where are they? With Kbrew, after the initial momentum and after talking to a lot of users, we realized it didn't have the value that we anticipated, it had from a customer's point of view or from a user's point of view. And also the problem space is not as easy as we thought out in the beginning, basically. So we kind of, stopped developing that project, and we said, let it be out there. If somebody wants to pick it up or, use it, that's still fine. But we'll not put active efforts into developing that project. BotCube, we kept going at it. We did a lot of evangelism, community, sharing of knowledge, and also a lot of users also responded with a lot of PRs, issues, and things that they saw that could be useful. So we kept actively developing it. We put a lot of effort also in making sure the documentation, the contributor experience, all that was, absolutely first grade. And over time, we got a investment into CubeShop, into BotCube from a company called CubeShop, which was like a VC-backed company, basically. The other two projects, which is Fission and Cryas, are still actively being used by users and community. Like recently, we came to know Fission is being used by a large CPG company for doing their machine learning model management, something that we didn't know, and they have been using it in production like for almost 3 years, basically. And Cryas still remains active, as a under development project, basically. Now, one of the side effects, which was a good effect for us, was the way we operate as a company also was a lot of open source inspired. For example, all the revenue numbers of the company are public to the entire company, for example. A lot of times there might be a problem which might be cutting across multiple functions of the company. People form a group almost voluntarily, pick up the problem, they go after it, get whatever is required and solve those problems, right? So I think a lot of those community first aspects also reflected in us as a company, when we operate as a company. Yeah, I think that's a brief journey I want to talk about of us, as a company, from contributing to open source, to being very actively developing projects. Thank you for your time.